Friends, Americans, lend me your ears. Welcome back to quite possibly the wokest podcast in America. So woke, we never sleep because sleep is the cousin of death. Bam! Welcome back to another episode of Pop Culture Uncovered. I am ecstatic to be here tonight. There's so many amazing things to talk about. Let's talk about Dune Prophecy. One, in terms of setting and in relationship to the new films, really quickly, I just want to say this is taking place 10,000 years before the birth of Paul Atreides. So if you are coming in and you are not a Dune person, and what I mean by you're not a Dune person, I happen to own 2 Chris knives. One made consistent with the current Dune films, one consistent with the Space Jesus 1984 version. If you're not like me and have been a Dune fan for decades, you may not be fully versed on all of this. So I will say the setting is 10,000 years before the birth of Paul Atreides. I don't think that matters. I think this is one of the few franchises where if you like Dune, I think this is actually a perfect jumping on place. The story starts right at the end of the Butlerian Jihad. All you need to know is that there was a war against artificial intelligence and humanity won. And now we are dealing with the known universe and the aftermath of all of that. So, having said that, I want to get into our first real topic on this, which is the look of the show. Pete, I know that you are an Andor fan. This is the only other show that I can think of where, as I started to watch it visually, my first response was, this is incredibly consistent with the movie. Like, you see Andor and you think to Rogue One, and you're like, these images match in my brain. For most times where I've had films that I've loved that were turned into television shows, even with the Marvel stuff, like I love, Falcon and the Winter Soldier, but I can look at it and be like, it's not quite the same as an MCU movie. This is disturbingly consistent. So I guess what was your feel on just like the look and the aesthetics of the show?
It captures the tone kind of exactly right. I think what's interesting is there's so many settings. And so it already feels, like you don't have to build these big elaborate sets. You just have to plop me down in an environment that looks like, okay, you at least flew your actors to a different continent to do this. And that's it. It feels vast. It feels like, okay, there are many, many planets. There are many different cultures. There's many different things going on all at once. And they also serve as characters themselves, which I felt like was true about Dune, the movies as well, is that each location is its own character. And then the people within it are, reacting and interacting. You see the Bene Gesserit, in particular, who do the most traveling in this show, from planet to planet, environment to environment. You see how, their constant is changed by the environment that they're in, and so that, to me, the tone very much matches. You can't match the budget of these massive movies, but I think as far as the look is concerned, it feels, it just feels like every place has an identity and every place has kind of a purpose to it. And so when you have echoes of the previous movie, of the movies, combat, between with royals and their trainers and things like that, it feels like it fits in the same world. And I think they've done an adequate job of making it look, like it is taking place, in the past. I think the tricky part is the technology is so similar. Like, that was one of the things Rosa says, like, if there's anything that takes me out, while we were watching it, she said, if there's anything that takes me out, it's the fact that, like, think of human advancement for the last 10,000 years. And then imagine that, like, even with the restrictions that, exist within the world of Dune, of the books, it doesn't feel technologically like 10,000 years before. But everything else, it feels like it fits in that world.
To Pete's point, I really think that they did a really good job of differentiating the worlds immediately the same way that they did with the films. One of my favorite lines is when Inez's brother, she asked her brother what the Bene Gesserit homeworld was like, and he was like, if you like sparsity and piety, then it's all good. But it's also a very subtle callback to the books. That's one of the things. Even the sets have been very subtle, interesting callbacks to the books that for people like me who've read all the books at one point or another throughout my life, I'm like, that meme of Leo pointing is me because I'm like, hey, I know why you did that. And so which to those who don't know, because the Bene Gesserit have literally the memories of everyone who came before them, they don't decorate because in their mind they can make the room seem like anything they want. So there's no point in decorating because for each of them, their room in their mind looks like what they want it to. It's a very subtle thing. I think that, as we were saying earlier, there's an oldness to it, right? It is what they were trying to go for with the prequels, the Star Wars prequels, where they were trying to show you how vibrant the world was before the Empire took over. Just like you see Andor and Rogue One, and you're like, this is definitely that in-between space between Revenge of the Sith and A New Hope. And you can see the through line. They do a really good job of showing you the through line. But I need to talk about one of the things that I absolutely loved from a set design perspective was how the sheer terror of seeing the Machine Wars. That I was not ready for it. It is the first time we have ever gotten that depiction, and it was as terrifying as it should be. And it wasn't, surprisingly, again, not heavily CGI. There's definitely CGI being used there, but it was mostly because we could see the toll it was taking on the people on the ground, if that makes sense. They did a great job of establishing very quickly within like 20 minutes all of these different places. And I really appreciated that.
Yeah, I will say, Belle, really quickly for the visuals for the Butler and Jihad. I thought about the first couple seconds of the Terminator, and I was like, in terms of how they set that up, and I was like, was like, hey, if James Cameron made it, don't break it, just copy.
People forget that the whole reason that Dune is the way it is because Terminator happened for them in real time, and they were like, never again. We're shutting it down. We're shutting all of this down. This will never be a thing that happens ever again.
So, all right. So jumping from the visuals to the Bene Gesserit itself, I think one of the fundamental concerns about this project when it was announced was, look, this is a really divisive time period in human society, especially in the West. There is a general aversion to look. There's a genuine pushback on telling narratives that do not center men or do not center white people in the storytelling. Most fan bases have a toxic aspect or have maybe it's well shit, I'm gonna call it toxic, but other people would say that they're just advocating um that they are very focused on having, the traditional focus and gaze of those characters. And the Bene Gesserits in Dune are background characters. They're relevant, at least in the first three Dune books. Because unlike Belle, I haven't read them all yet. I haven't gotten past Dune Messiah. But in the first three books, they're very much, Machiavellian schemers operating out of the shadows who themselves are power players with no power. They hold no great outward roles. They control no armies, and yet somehow they are in the back. They're the Cardinal Richelieu, of the story. For those of you who read the Three Musketeers, but this is a story about the Bene Gesserit, and I feel like one of the smartest hooks was men who act simple behind stuff like this, like having taken the position of women are all soft and feminine and weak, and if you make a girls' Dune show, it's gonna be all touchy feely. And it's like, how about this? How about we make the two most important characters Harkonnens? And so I just think the way the Bene Gesserit and the fact that we're seeing them when their power is not at its apex, which is where we've always seen them in all the depictions of Dune. Where it's, Paul being tested with the Gom Jabbar, we're seeing them as they're trying to put the pieces together to be able to solidify what they've acquired for themselves. And so, Belle, I wanted to talk with you real quick first.
I thought it was a very purposeful choice, especially with Kasha's casting and Lila's casting. I thought it was an extremely purposeful choice for Raquela and Dorothea and Lila and Kasha to be all these women of color. And I thought, I see what you're doing. I'm gonna let them cook, because it's a conversation, especially post November 5th, that we need to be having.
I will confess, I have been reading a book called Dune and Philosophy. I would encourage anybody to go check it out. One of the things that they kind of touched upon that I thought was particularly relevant to the Bene Gesserit was it was a really great article of talking about how Dune is and is not a depiction of a feminist future, talking about how women are taught that they do not control their body. Their bodies are not something they can control. Their bodies are just something to be managed. Which literally, as you can see, the Bene Gesserit training where they're training outside in the middle of a rainstorm. They're training in the middle of a dry day. They do physical training, mental training. Like the expectation is that all the way down to the agony. The idea of the premier thing about the Bene Gesserits is control down to a cellular level, which makes perfect sense when you say if this is about the application and use of power, you can wield no power till you completely control yourself. And so I really feel like it elevates the Bene Gesserits to a position in the Dune that is really articulated well in the Dune books of you better never underestimate a single Bene Gesserit because between the knowledge she has and the access she has to the ancestral memories of a reverend mother who's advising her, you're not fighting a person, you're fighting an institution and a system. And I think the great thing about this show is we're seeing the building of that institution and we're seeing its initial and the original sin of it in terms of letting a Harkonnen be the one who's kind of taking it forward and how that kind of poisons everything to begin with. But we've kind
It
of touched
was
on this,
built on a lie, right? So the
right?
first action is built on the first action. Her first action is built on a murder of someone going, this is not the path that we started on, and you're about to take us down a path that is going to end us and so many other people, and you don't want to listen. And she doesn't want to. And I was like, this is why y'all were doomed from the start. Because for those of us, shoot, even if you hadn't read the book, you've seen the movies, you know that because of the actions that Valia specifically takes during this time period, we're going to end with the annihilation of worlds, which is not what they wanted. Because she let her vengeance and her arrogance make her choices.
Pete, did you have anything you wanted to add before we get to talking about the cast and kind of the other aspects of the story?
I think it's Belle's point is kind of perfect. Like there's the self-contained decision where you have the person who, is supposed to be most in charge of the great plan, inserting their, you know, personal feelings, philosophies into it while still being the person who is the most like we have to do things this exact way for our, for our exact plan because the prophecy is this, but you've already got your thumb on the scale from day one. No wonder we end up where we end up. And I think that's the brilliant part of it is that everything about Dune seems to be about prophecies that are false or prophecies that come true, but it's a monkey's paw. And that I feel like is the thing that I love most about this show is the fact that it's not immune to it, and if anything, it's like seeing how that all began and how it all went wrong 10,000 years before it went wrong.
I'll say this and then we'll jump to the cast. I agree with everything both of you guys are saying because I'm like, when you look at Dune, it's like taking it from this moment with Valia going all the way to God Emperor. This this attempt to steer and guide humanity, it's like a reminder of y'all don't have to worry about the AI. Human beings are so
That
complicated and so flawed and so fragile and so emotionally unstable that the most it's kind of like what Alan Moore touched upon with Watchmen. You don't want real superheroes because real superheroes would be jacked up beyond all human comprehension. Now, in terms of the cast and the rest of the story, let me just first just start by giving some flowers. Emily Watson, who I feel like I have loved her in everything that she's been in, but nothing more than I loved her in Chernobyl, which I think is still got to be on the top 20 best things HBO has ever done, was absolutely perfect in terms of being cast as Valeria Harkonnen because she has the ability to come off as sincere and thoughtful, and at the same time you know how dangerous she is. There's never a moment where you're confused about what her nature is, but you see her interacting with the younger initiates of the sisterhood and you want to believe.
Hmm.
um then from there, just really quick touching on the cast, because I want you guys to be able to put your own thoughts. I'm going to say Olivia Williams as Tula. I have not seen her prior performances, but from what I'm seeing with what she's doing with Tula, she makes me want to go back and watch them. I think Chloe Lee as Lila was genuinely stunning, and Travis Fimmel. I was not a Vikings fan. I
Hmm.
did not watch Vikings. I will say this: that man is magnetic. What he's done with this character, and I've only made it through the halfway mark of episode 3. But this has got to be one of the best acted characters I've seen in a long time. I would love when this is all said and done to hear about his process, about how he approached doing the character, because it's really much like it's like peeling off the layers of an onion, right? You thought you had a feel for who he was in episode 1. You started to get a better sense of the absolute terror of what he was at the beginning of episode 2. But by the time you got to the end of episode 2, you were like, "Oh snap! We've entered into it's Rasputin and the Antichrist mixed together, and he's here." Um, Pete, I'll kick it to you. Your other thoughts about the cast, and I guess the cast and how the story is playing out as we go through episodes 1 and 2.
So, man, the cast is fantastic. Like Emily Watson does a lot of things really well because you're torn about this character. And Emily Watson carries that perfectly. She has menace, she has purpose. You can see her flaw, you can see her frustrations, you can see her sort of like machinations, and you can also see how she ends up being so charismatic that she still remains in charge even when she question even when people question her decisions, even when she you know uh, it doesn't let anyone else in on her plans, including her own sister. It doesn't matter because she's so, I don't know, she's sometimes terrifying. And so I think that's what makes ultimately like the end of episode 2 even more impactful, because when you see somebody who's so powerful and is so ready to use that power, rendered, you know, uh, not not quite as powerful as they thought, it puts some weight on it. And I think she brings a lot of that weight. The relationship between the two sisters, Olivia Williams, her performance, you feel that they're sisters, you feel that they are equals in different ways. I love how episode 3 takes that one line where she's like, when have I ever been reluctant to do what has to be done, and like turns it into an entire thing. The younger versions of these characters are absolutely pulling their weight in the way that they convey their older selves. That these actors are like have done their homework. These young actors are doing such an amazing job of just holding themselves right alongside these very dignified actors. And you're right, Travis Fimmel to me he's a lot of fun. And I didn't expect that. Like I just kind of expected to just be sort of annoyed by this guy. He's been a lot of fun to watch. And also Mark Strong has also been doing a really interesting job of just watching somebody being very conflicted in a very big kind of way. It has that like West Wing sort of feel to it, in that like you don't really want to see the humanity of somebody who has to make such big decisions. You want them to just be very wise and knowing, and you're like you see where they struggle. And I think I just didn't expect it to be as Every time I think, is this show not quite as good as I want it to be? It does something where I'm like, damn it! Like I gotta wait another week and figure out what's gonna happen.
Well, you know, it's amazing what happens when you give talented actors, you know, scripts and things to do. Because when you say Mark Strong, my first thought as you were talking was, I was like, it's hard to believe that he played Dr. Sylvania in Shazam. It's like damn.
Right.
It's like if all of this was available, how you couldn't as the scriptwriter be like, I know we were gonna do this thing, but we're gonna play this really different because we got Mark Strong now.
You know what I thought,
What?
just to bring it back for a second, was the fact that Olivia Williams was our Moira McTaggart in X-Men 3. Like, we
Oh
had a
snap.
moment. We could have had a really great character come out of that movie series, but by the time X3 was done, it was done.
But I'm gonna kick it to you in 1 second. I do want to give one other shout out just to kind of highlight something. Jae Kim, who plays sister Kasha, who we lost very early on in the series. To me, the hallmark of a great written show is when you take away a character I was already starting to fall in love with, and you strip them from me, and I'm like, but I thought I'd get 3 seasons with her. Like, why didn't the? So it's the to have actors that are that talented because she chewed up the screen when she was out there. To have somebody that talented and to be off that character so early sends like a clear signal to the audience that there are no sacred cows. It's 10,000 years before Dune as you know it. Anybody can get it. So do not show up here expecting like well, I expect Emperor Carino to do such and such. You don't know that Emperor Carino's going to be here that much longer. You don't know what's going to happen. And I think, I hate to see great actors sacrificed to be able to do that, but I'm like, Jae Kim's performance, she was so fantastic. That I was like, damn. Belle, over to you.
It's funny you should mention her because that's exactly who I was going to mention next. Specifically, both her and Jodie May, who plays the Empress, Empress Natalia, and how the two of them do such a great job with the very few scenes that they have, especially considering how big of a role Jodie May had on The Witcher. The few scenes that they have, but you are already 100, and it's weird because those two characters are on opposite ends of the spectrum with regard to how things should be going. One of the main conflicts of this show, and it's a very interesting conversation, is when you let other people into your marriage. Because there's a scene in the first episode where she says, the Empress says, there was a time when you took my counsel. And I think that the worlds were better off for it. And Emperor Carino goes, I don't know. And it's like, honey, not listening to your wife is going to damn your entire line. It's going to be a slow burn. It's not going to be as brutal as the Harkonnens, but it's coming, boo. It's coming. But at the same time, you can tell that Kasha, Jaya May's character, genuinely cares about these people. So to see her not just die, but die brutally in a way that no one saw coming at any point. None of we, as a book reader, I was like, well, okay, wasn't expecting that. And I knew that Homeboy was a lot more than he appeared to be. Travis Fimmel's character, like a lot more. But even I was like, oh, okay, this is what we doing now. Oh, all right. And I was wrecked. She was in one episode. That is a testament to her as an actress, to the power of her performance. She doesn't actually have a lot of lines. And yet you are there going, please, please survive this. Please survive this somehow, some way. And you're like, she's not gonna. As soon as you hear that scream, actually, as soon as you see her nightmare, she ain't gonna make it. I didn't realize she was gonna not make it past the first episode, but I knew She wasn't going. See, she had that nightmare, and as soon as, going back to my earlier point, Valia dismissed it out of hand, I was like, y'all, she's doomed. She's doomed. Kasha's doomed, and all of y'all are doomed. Maybe not as soon, but Kasha's definitely toast. So I really, really respect how well this cast is doing. The little things, the physicality, the way, even the way they move. I don't think the Richisis get enough credit because they're so over the top in their presentation. And so seeing them there, and the way those characters, you don't like the Duke as soon as you see him. And that's the actor. As soon as you see the Duke of Richies, you're like, I don't know. I don't like this man. I don't like it. I'm not a fan whatsoever. And so that is a testament to the actors. It's a testament to the choices in clothing to signify the difference in these people. It's just the fact that, to be honest, we've talked more. The fact that Mark Strong, who is a freaking legend, who I've genuinely been watching all of my life, is the least talked about person because all of the cast is so good, and most of these people are complete unknowns who have maybe 4 or 5 credits to their name. And he is the least, I don't want to say the least impressive because what he's doing is a much more quiet thing in terms of acting that has a long-term impact. But the fact that he wasn't even the main one that I was like, yeah, yo, you know what? I'm so focused. Jodie May is stealing the scenes from him. The focus, the young lady who's playing Yanez, Sarah-Sofie Busanina. I'm looking at her. I'm focused on her in the scenes. They're doing such a good job. This cast is so good. And I love a slow burn, and I wasn't sure. The first episode was slow for me, but each episode has picked up. Each episode has picked up the pace, and without dumbing anything down. And that's a testament to the writers.
I think it's funny. There's a line from V for Vendetta I love where Evie is telling V that she's just a person and she's not that interesting. He's like, that's not true. He's like, everybody's got a story. And I'd very much like, and so it's every character has something about them the way they're written that's interesting. There are no characters that are just there. Even when it was Pruitt before he got killed, it was like he started off being like a little ish, and then he has his moment where you're like, oh, there's really a great little kid underneath there, and then he's gone. There are no moments with characters that don't have value, and so I think that's the thing for me that's really. Now I'll say this: I'm not a fantasy person, but if this is the science fiction analog to Game of Thrones, I can understand why people were so enamored with that show because there has not been an actor that I've seen on the screen, whether we're talking about the Initiates or whether we're talking about the Harkonnen family dinner in episode 3. Every single actor I have seen on this show, I have been like, I loved you and I never knew I loved you. And I'm so glad that you're here and I'm here and we can have this moment together. So I am praying that they do not Westworld this ish. It's 10,000 years. We ain't got to rush to get to nowhere. If this story runs out of space, we can jump forward 1,000 years because it's Dune Prophecy. The prophecy covers a lot of territory. But I do want to, start kind of trying to wrap things up. So, Belle, I want to lean on you a little bit for a second because I want to talk about the Frank Herbert and Brian Herbert Dune books and how these kind of knits that universe together in a way that we've never seen that visually. There's always kind of been a quiet disconnect between in the fandom between Frank Herbert's books, which we'll say the fans are like, that's 100% canonical. And there's no need to debate any of it. If Frank Herbert wrote it, that's Dune. And there's like the Brian Herbert people, and it feels like it's almost like Dune had its Star Wars split decades before Star Wars did, where it seems like either you like what Brian Herbert did, trying to to add to the complexity that his dad raised and cover some different territory, or you don't. I think that this is impressive in terms of setting it in the Butler and Jihad, but still having it linked to everything else that comes. Dune looks like a coherent, well articulated universe where I'm like, damn, like even looking at the books, I'm like, people who did not have a lot of affection for Brian Herbert books after the first episode, I'm willing to bet you at least 30% of them are like, you know what? I'm gonna go ahead and read the Butler and Jihad because now listening to YouTube explanations of it isn't sufficient. I actually want to know now. Brian got some stuff from his dad's notes. I want to at least hear Brian's articulation of his dad's idea. And I think that's the last kind of masterstroke on this show, where it's you already had the we want to be thematically and visually, if not related, cousins to what Denis Villeneuve has done. And now story wise, we're saying, look, this is Dune. Dune covers a lot of territory. You don't have to like every single aspect of every single story. Maybe you're the type of person you ain't never gonna read the House Carino book. Cause that ain't you. That's fine. I guarantee you by the time we get to the end of Mark Strong's arc, there are gonna be people who are like, it'll only take me a week to read House of Carino. Maybe I should just sit down and read it. So Belle, having read the whole series, 'cause I've only read up to Dune Messiah. Um yeah, give us your kind of view on that.
So it's interesting you should bring that up because I'm almost at the end of House Atreides, which was the prelude to Dune that Brian Herbert and Kevin J. Anderson wrote. And that was technically my first book. And what I ended up doing was reading the House books and then alternating them between the original series. And I think for me personally, it gave me a richer understanding of these characters and why they move in the ways that they do. Why, say, Duncan and Gurney are the way they are. Because now you have the backstory. When you read House Atreides specifically, you have the backstory about how Duncan, as a child, was killing Harkonnens because he had to survive. This show is almost the visual representation of doing that. And what I mean by that is that it is a near flawless combination of what we know from the Frank Herbert series and the Brian Herbert, Kevin J. Anderson series. And it's respectful of both. It blends those two things in. And again, the Brian Herbert and Kevin J. Anderson stuff is canonical. But as you said, people feel a type of way about it. And I get it. Trust me, I get it. But I think that this show has a deep understanding of the themes around the story. I think that it is highly respectful, just like the two new films are, of the point that Brian Herbert and Frank Herbert were trying to make. Which is, A, you can't have somebody else come in and save you, because that ain't it. And B, high key, white people need to stay out of indigenous people's business. Like, that's what it is. It is what it is. That's what he was saying. People have tried to say in the years since that that's not what he was saying. And I'm like, I don't know how he could make it more obvious that that's what he was saying. Leave indigenous and black and brown people alone. Leave their resources alone. I don't know how many different ways this man could say that. So,
Belle, it's not popular to tell people like, hey, you know what? You don't want Space Jesus.
No.
Space Jesus is not going to work out well
for nobody.
For anybody.
Not even him.
Right. Not even Space. I mean, yes. I don't want to, go off into onto a rant, but I will say Paul Atreides' character arc has got to be one of the most
Worst.
like if there was ever an example of a pop culture character where you're like, oh, so and so's got such and such power, you don't want to be able, you don't want to be Paul Atreides.
Nobody wants to be Paul Atreides. Trust me.
Like literally, go from being the universe's supreme super being to being literally blind, crippled, and crazy by the time the story ends. Not
a great look. So I will say this: it is a wonderful mixing of the canon, and they're doing a really interesting thing where there are things that are in the original 6 books that are shown here. But it's also very much a Sisterhood of Dune series. And I am very interested to see how this goes because they have so many things to play with. They have, I want to say, 15 to 20 books to play with, baby. This could be HBO's, and they're all completed, unlike Game of Thrones. So this could be their thing.
Sadly, because I cannot interrogate Pete about the Dune books because Pete has already professed the fact that he has not read them, which Pete confirmed.
Yeah.
Okay. On that note, you have reached the end of yet another episode of Pop Culture Uncovered. I am not going to tell you that we're going to do Dune Prophecy every conceivable week. I do think we'll check. Okay, we'll do whatever the hell Pete decides we're going to do from a programming standpoint, but I can tell you that we will probably be talking about Dune Prophecy consistently throughout the course of the season, so definitely check that out. A few quick recommendations. One, The Philosophy of Dune, I think is really worth a read if you're a fan of this series, because look, I think Dune, like a lot of really great science fiction, plays with such complicated themes. So sometimes it's nice to have somebody sit and unpack everything because you get a chance to go back and re-enjoy, the content in a way that you couldn't before. I will also say there has been, for all of these Brian Herbert Dune books that we've been talking about, Boom Studios has been putting out great graphic novel adaptations of House Harkonnen, House Atreides. So if you're somebody who you're sitting and reading a novel length book is not your thing, but you're very much into Dune, it very much might be worth it for you to check out those graphic novels. And if you're at all interested in hearing more about them, please leave a comment on this video on YouTube, and then maybe Belle and I will come up and follow up and do some comparisons between how the books are handled in prose form as opposed to how they're handled in graphic novels. But so let me know if you're interested in that going forward. Belle?
Also, since we will be starting officially our book club in January, if you all want us to do the Dune books, please let us know in the comments when this goes up on YouTube, and the ladies and I will, from the Lovely Angels, will sit down and do the Dune books in order over the course of the next year. So if you want us to do it, you got to let us know, guys.
As long as it's not like the Bene Gesserit order and you allow men to contribute, because if you end up doing that, I'm going to want to participate.
No.
Okay. All right. That's
See what
fine.
Happens.
See, Pete, this is this.
You get.
That. So definitely check all those things out. We're on YouTube. We're also available wherever you listen to great podcasts. If you like us on YouTube, please like, listen, and subscribe. If you really love us, we'd appreciate it if you shared it. Also, we'd appreciate it just as much as if you leave a comment and let us know what you like and what you didn't like. So, for Belle and Pete, this is Armand. We hope that your prophesized future is much more positive than Paul Atreides or apparently any of humanity's going forward, because basically in Dune, everybody's a drug addict because everybody's hopped up on spice. So, until then, have a good one. Bye.